This is where it's going. Is it not a beautiful day? Our outer world reflects our inner, so we are extremely good-looking people. I'm glad you're here today. My name is Susan Zoller. I'm one of the ministers here at the center, and yes, I know I only have on one earring. Robert told me not to mess up the sound. So, welcome. Welcome. Now picture this with me, please. It's 1956, it's Sunday, and it's Easter. Against the background of lush azaleas in a small town, Louisiana, two little girls are squinting in the sunlight, working to look at the camera. Their dresses are starched, and they have on these petticoats underneath them that are very uncomfortably starched and ironed. Supported, by those petticoats, the dress is out like this. It was the fashion. Hats and purses are involved. White gloves, white socks, and patent leather shoes as well. We know who we were and are. This is a great thing. And another picture. Now it's spring of 1957. Yes, it's Sunday. And yes, one more time, it's Easter. Now this time, because they learned from the last time, we're in my grandmother's living room, not squinting. Yes, their starched dresses and the scratchy supporting petticoats, patent leather shoes and socks. I think there were purses and gloves involved in hats. But in our eyes, the highlight of the day is a beautifully wrapped basket with that Nobel Prize of Easter within it, the chocolate bunny. It was my cousin Lydia and I, and we weren't thinking about Jesus that time. We weren't. We were thinking about how agonizingly long the church service would be before we could get home and get into those baskets. And most of the adults were working on those pictures, trying to capture that perfect idyllic moment, and the others were in the kitchen creating this incredible feast, and it was good. And at this moment, Jesus, who is taken very seriously, very Southern Baptist-y, was not on the agenda. That would happen when we went to church. So these are my third and fourth year Easter memories. Now, they're upheld by photographs. They're mingled with remembered meals and uncomfortable outfits. It's true. And I bet you and I have some parallel experiences, whatever your tradition was, because despite our varying backgrounds, each of us has memories of family rituals, regardless of how you defined your family. And perhaps they centered on religious observations, or maybe they didn't. Not everyone goes to church. After all, there's lots of other rituals, birthdays, births, holidays, family dinners, first days of school. There's an endless number of things that teach us by absorption what to do and how to be on various occasions, whether we realized it or not. We absorbed that. So we were influenced by association, indeed, whether it was healthy or not, whether it was kind or thoughtless, loving or mean-spirited, or perhaps even downright mean and abusive. All of this is true, but it doesn't have to continue to be so. The original title of this talk was Resurrection Really? But let me make it clear, it's Resurrection Really, because I was concerned that the title might be misinterpreted as unchristian or else a totally Christian service. We're not Christian here. We're interfaith truly. And so let's talk about resurrection. What is a resurrection? First of all, the teacher in me has to define it. The act of rising from the dead, especially the rising of Jesus after death and burial. Also a rising again as from decay, disuse, misuse. Interestingly enough, looking for this definition, I found included a Christian Science definition that looks like we wrote it. It says Christian Science says that resurrection is rising above mortality through the understanding of spiritual life as demonstrated by Jesus the Christ. I like that. But let's face it, most of us, when we think of Easter, we're thinking of the life of Jesus the Christ, his resurrection after crucifixion. But we don't teach crucifixion and resurrection here. We have the world's religions' shared principles that we teach: the oneness, the unity, and the sanctity of all life. And Easter certainly celebrates the sanctity of life and its cycles, but to be honest, it's not originally Christian. It was pagan. It was celebrated with the pagan festival of Beltane. And Beltane celebrates the renewal of spring and fertility. Beltane was rowdy. It involved drinking, dancing, and various fertility rituals. In other words, it was a Baptist teenager's dream come true and my parents' nightmare. Now, not surprisingly, growing up, I never heard of Beltane. No. But as one person described it, as the earth awakens from winter's sleep, flowers bloom and the sun reveals itself more with each passing day. Coincidentally, it's a time of celebration and remembrance for the world's religions. Christianity observes in some places Lent, Holy Week, and Easter. Judaism has Pesach, or Passover. The Japanese Buddhists celebrate Oigan, reflect on the birth of the Buddha. And neo-pagans and Wiccans everywhere still happily celebrate Beltane. There are people out there right now, I'm telling you. That's no joke. While some faiths say that their celebrations are clearly rooted in events outside the Earth's cycle of life, because that's how it came to be through the pagans, there's still parallels to the renewal of life and all that happens during spring. But let's give the pagans credit where credit is due, for some of the joy this day holds, because it is definitely of pagan origin. First of all, dying eggs. This is the pagan birth and rebirth, spring and renewal. 2, the Easter bunny was based on the pagan goddess of Istra, I may be pronouncing that, of fertility. And these bunnies, who are known for their enthusiastic procreation, fit the bill. But Germany had this egg-laying hare or rabbit called Osterhaus. And, the Germans being neat and tidy, they made nests to try and pull them in to their homes to come visit. But it's kind of messy, so they made them into baskets so they wouldn't have to deal with that mess. True fact. Now, I am not going to discuss the maypole, where young virginal girls dance in circles around the maypole, holding ribbons that are tied to the pole. You can see Beltane for further information. Other influences exist. We have ham on Easter. But I will tell you one thing. Easter parades are not pagan. They actually originated in New York from frustrated people who spent a lot of money on clothes for the event, who were very dissatisfied that they only got to be seen during the service. So they informally and promptly created a little post-church fashion show down Fifth Avenue outside their churches. The song, "On the Avenue, Fifth Avenue," that's what it's about. So, to influence the loving and rowdy pagans, the Christian Easter was moved closer and closer to Beltane to try and woo the pagans to their fold. But Easter is also associated with the Jewish celebration of Pesach or Passover, which is from the Exodus, the great Exodus from Egypt. So we can see that Beltane has been reinvented. What is reinvention anyway? Here it is. To invent again or anew, especially without knowing the first invention already exists. And 2, to remake or make over as in a different form to bring back or revive. So what does all this have to do with how we can use this? You know, what does a century-old Earth cycle event bring to us today? And I think it's a lot. Those rituals and stories we absorbed through our growing up were not always the best for us. They may have been wonderful, but however, some religions teach poverty and lack as spiritually good, to be desired. And we must act in only established patterns that may not be in keeping with who we are. They may be cruel and cast people away for not behaving. But who are we anyway? Are we here to follow someone's rules? You and I are manifestations of the Most High, the divine, God, if you will. We're created by the divine mind of God, to express God, to express life creatively, to live abundantly, to create more and more of that which is God, because everything is God. Accordingly, we were not put on this earth to live without, to be unhappy, to be alone, and certainly not to be imperfect beings who got punished for their misdeeds or impure thoughts. I can repeat that if you need it. It is written. A Baptist girl growing up loves to say these things. Really. The kingdom of heaven is at hand, and it is within. The kingdom of heaven is at hand, and it is within. We create our own heaven and our own hell daily by our beliefs, our decisions, our actions, our feelings. Absolutely. We are not punished by what some people have made out to be a Superman in the sky who is or has some flunky angel watching our every move to see what we're doing and record any misdeeds and making sure to let us know we will be judged by them in front of everyone throughout eternity. Can you imagine the embarrassment? Some people don't even like to get up in class, much less before all of eternity. And this is what we're told. There'll be judgment. The divine is not actively involved in our everyday life. That can be a shock. The divine is not actively engaged in our everyday life. We were created and we are free to choose. There are no angels up there with little notepads taking notes so we can go, tattle to God. Really. Some people believe that, and they are unhappy because of it. It didn't affect me too much, but truly, there are a lot of people who have this experience of feeling very guilty for whatever we do. Because science of mind is an expansive philosophy. It is teaching us it is God's great pleasure to give us the kingdom, that we can direct our energy and thoughts on that which we choose to create and desire, and through orderly spiritual laws, it is then created. It is done unto us. We don't control anything. We direct our energy, our thoughts, and our actions. And the universe just reflects it back to us in our physical world. We don't have to prove we're worthy. We don't have to beg any big person in the sky. We don't have to even actively try to be good. It's just the way that it works. It's the way that it works. So if we want to change, we have to know that no one can do it for us. We have to do it ourselves. And what we have to do is change our thoughts, our feelings, our actions, and our beliefs. No matter how intelligent you and I are, when the rubber meets the road and it comes down to choosing between intelligence and emotion, emotion almost always wins out. Think of it. How many of us took those awful driver's ed classes where they showed all the wrecks and things, but we were learning how to calculate how fast you're going in feet per second and what happens if you have an accident? And they showed us visions of this, pictures of this. Now, I bet almost a lot of people have seen that. And certainly we've been taught that speeding, excessive speeding particularly, is very dangerous. But yet, if we are pressured for time, if something's going on that's important to us, how many of us, and I want a show of hands, have gone over the speed limit? I want to, okay, anyone who didn't raise your hand now. Okay. Emotion wins out. You know, it wins out unless energy is directed to changing, to create thoughtful, affirming, and supportive new thoughts and beliefs. After all, it is written, we, as we are, so it is. How we think is how we are. For as a man or woman thinketh in their heart, it is so. We were taught that. Some of us had teachings that said, and your heart is dirty, and your heart is unkind, and your heart can never be pure. That's not what we teach here. But I will tell you one thing, it does behoove us to examine our consciousness and see what's in it. There may be beliefs in there we don't realize, and that we would certainly never, ever want to experience. Examination can lead to new understanding and new ways of being. Oh, well, how do you do that? Well, we can pray, we can affirm, we can meditate, contemplate. We can take classes at some place like this. It teaches our essential goodness. Because you know what? The divine spirit, the one mind, always says yes. Always says yes. Responding to the energy patterns that we're transmitting by who we are and what we're thinking and what we believe. You know, even at SLCA, we had some wonderful, thoughtful conversations about race to help us look and examine what's going on in us that even a place like this may not realize, so that we can cleanse our thoughts so we can have better thoughts by changing our thinking. If you turned on the radio and something awful was on there that you never wanted to hear, would you stand there and say bad radio, or would you just change the channel? Really? We can change the channel on our thinking because God is going to say yes to it, and the way is made possible. Now, last night and Friday night, I was working on this talk, and it just wasn't coming together. And I started thinking about those pictures, and I went and got 3 boxes of pictures because I have become the family historian of sorts. And as people passed, I got all the pictures. There are hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of them. And, you know, it really came to me, especially as I looked for the Easter pictures that I never found in 2 nights, that there's some beautiful memories there. They're wonderful. And there are some that are very unhappy and sad. Some of them are kind of tragic in my opinion. But I'm not living from there. But working through these hundreds of pictorial histories, you know, I found these pictures of my grandmothers and one of my grandmother's mother. She was not a nice woman, and she looked really angry and mean. And I understand she was. You know, some of these people came from very hard-scrabble backgrounds. They were working really diligently for hours a day in the heat of the South, scraping out a living. And so as I was there, I started to feel things. And I felt the passing of the years, the passing of the generations, the beliefs, the thoughts, the emotions, the heartaches and the victories. You know, it's interesting. I noticed it, how prejudice were passed down. I could feel it. And also how enlightenment came and people began to question and soften over time. They became more curious and more open to learning. I could just feel it. The belief that change was possible increased as I had these. I felt it coming. And things transitioned over time to better conditions. It was wonderful and it was really eye-opening. But the biggest thing for me is a picture of my grandmother, my mother's mother. She was from southern Mississippi, and she and three other people that I don't know were standing on a railroad track. And the railroad track is wide as it comes to you, and there they're standing. And you know that at some place it comes to a point behind them. Long dresses, heavy coats. I don't know what they were doing on that railroad track, but they came there for a picture. The tracks converged, but it felt like that was their history, that everything that had come forward through time to make them, and that as they looked forward, they were looking toward me, the future that they didn't know, and that I could feel the future and the tracks continuing to diverge behind me as it created the generations and the millennia. You know, they're standing captured in the moment, gazing forward, and I just feel all their history and their history's history. You know, it's an illusion that those tracks were converging because they're the same distance the entire way apart. But I know that they're moving through time is what it represents, and that someday I too will be a memory. I will be a thought in people's memories, in people's minds, in their lives, for however long that it lasts. Because the cycle continues indefinitely. I feel the future before me, just like my grandmother stood on those tracks. It's the way for all of us. It's change and continuity, mingling and emerging. The period of time between the day that photograph was taken and today, I looked at their lives and what they must be. They weren't particularly pleasant. And I can tell you, my great-grandmother was not a pleasant person. You know, I could feel the fundamentalism in them, the rigidity, you know, that was taught and passed down from parent to child, even as the children begin to question some of those things. Our beliefs, even subconscious ones, reveal themselves when the intention to understand and to know more and better in our lives, when that decision is made. What comes up may not be pretty. Besides, if it was so pretty, you probably wouldn't have it in your subconscious or have forgotten it. And you say, oh no, I'm going to be there standing in front of the entire world watching every thought I ever had on Judgment Day. No, 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 no. You know, what you need to know will come to you when you affirm it. You're not going to have to, you know, that'd be like paint drying. It would. You don't have to do that. It's going to happen when you affirm it. So you know, the things we carry around is like a fish in the ocean who says, what water? We just carry these things with us. They're passed on. They're in our genes. They're in our consciousness. But they don't have to be. We can change our prejudices, our anger, our guilt and blame, even our ignorance. I don't have to know how, and neither do you. You know why? Because God knows. Because mine knows. And when we make that decision, things come together in such a way that things thought previously impossible are made possible. Now, it may come in a very mysterious way, you know, like poof, and seem magical, or it may happen through the everyday unfoldment of our lives. It doesn't have to be spectacular or extrasensory. What needs to be known will be known. But it doesn't matter how it happens, because anyway, the understanding is the result. When we know what we believe, then we can choose if we want different beliefs. If it hasn't been working, why would we want to keep them? And you say, well, that's just so hard, Susan. No, it is not. Affirm that it comes easily. That what you need to know, and it's done gently. And the result is a sense of joy and release. People are going to say, that is so hard. No, it's not. But if you believe it is, yea and verily. Yea and verily. In essence, it's redefining. You and I can decide to redefine or invent ourselves at any time. Remember, that definition includes even if they didn't know the invention was made before. So even if we don't know what we were thinking, we can release these things. We are not their prisoner. We are not static beings. You and I, even from conditions that feel like death, death of our heart, death of our love, we can resurrect. We can resurrect, and it is spiritually powerful. We rise from decay and disuse of our divine nature and create new ways of thinking and being. There's no past or present in the mind of God. So it happens here now. There's no waiting. There's no time. It may take some time to unfold in the physical world, but know that the moment we decide, the answer is yes. Right here, right now, yes. There's no memory. God's not up there, nor any angels say, I know what you did. I know how you've believed. I know how you've behaved. Who are you to do this? It's not that way. It's loving. It's wonderful. Now, one famous Science of Mind minister said this, and I love it. Yesterday ended last night. Yesterday ended last night. It's over. The present moment is what we have. How many of you would want to be judged on what you did at 9, 15, 21? Would you take career and love advice from a 9, 15, or 21-year-old person with what you know today? I don't think so. I surely wouldn't take it from myself. So stay present and stay aware. We change, and the universe said yes, and belief makes it so. Now, there's a resurrection story I would like to share with you. It was May 6, 1945, in Dachau concentration camp. There were Serbs, Greeks, and Russians there. The last prisoners had arrived a couple of days earlier from Buchenwald camp. And Dachau had just been liberated from the Germans by the Americans on April 29th, and the half-starved prisoners were finally given food as well as radios that were confiscated from prominent Nazis. Not everybody had a radio. So they learned of Hitler's suicide, of the fall of Berlin, and the surrender of German troops. They had a lot to feel resurrected from. They had a lot to be grateful for. And they wanted to have some type of an Easter celebration. But they didn't have any supplies. They didn't have a place. They had no wine, no vestments. But there was a place where the Catholic priests had been allowed to have their own prayer meeting in a particular barracks. And the Catholics offered to the Orthodox, which is pretty big, the use of their room. And all it contained was a table. There was no candle. There were no vestments. But they went in, and they were so grateful for this. Interestingly enough, there was only an icon in there of Theotokos. And I'm not sure who Theotokos is, but there was an icon on the wall to lift the vision. But they took new towels, the Americans did, took new towels and thread and gave it to those, and they sewed them together to make their own vestments. And then they went in the medical supply room for the doctors of the SS guards and took the red crosses that were for medical personnel and tied them on there. They were placed over the prisoners' gray and blue striped uniforms, and they began chanting, changing from language to language to language. Interestingly enough, and think of this, the canon that day is, in the beginning was the Word. In the beginning was the Word, which is what we say we believe in, the Word, the thought. And the shout rang out in several languages, but I'll share it with you in Greek. Christos aneste, Christos aneste, Christ is risen, Christ is risen. The Christ consciousness of oneness and love belongs to everyone. It is not Christian. Easter belongs to everyone for what it means of the resurrection of the individual soul. It belongs to everyone who long for peace and respect for life. You know, history doesn't actually contain proof of Jesus the Christ. By the way, the Christ means the anointed. His parents were not, Joseph and Mary Cross. Seriously, some people think that. There is a mention of a rabbi in some far-flung region of the Roman Empire. Christ is a title that conveys understanding or anointment. You know, the Christ consciousness is above religion, it's above dogma, it's above nationality, race, sexual orientation, or anything else we can think of. It is available to every one of us if we are open and receptive. This is the resurrection and the oneness of Easter. This is what it truly represents. An interesting note. When I was cleaning out my mother's house after she passed, I came upon some of my grandmother's books. I was more than surprised to find several by Norman Vincent Peale. He was an American Dutch Reformed Church minister, and he openly acknowledged that he got his philosophy, his theology, from Ernest Holmes, founder of Science of Mind. You could have blown me over. My grandmother was reading metaphysics. She was. You know, sic tipper tyrannus translates, thus be it ever to tyrants. So may it be to the tyrants of the world who go in and blow up churches on Easter Sundays. May it be to the people who are suffering that their tyrants be transformed. May our own inner tyrants be transformed. May we delight in our chosen traditions, the ones that support us. May we live empowered and lovingly embrace life and expand our consciousness. Enjoy creation. You know, we can find a way that every person of every walk of life can awaken. I think it's possible, but it's an individual decision. Let us lift our vision and know our divine nature, the abundance of this universe, and how truly beautiful, how loving that we are. Resurrection, really? Oh, yes. Reinvention? Oh, yes. It's wonderful. And so today, from the heart of what the meaning is, I say, Christos aneste, Christ has risen. It has risen in us. Blessed be, and so it is. Thank you. Thank you.